She challenged her ex's will after he left her penniless with hidden twins. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrington, but Richard Blackwood left you nothing in his will." Victoria Harrington stared at the lawyer across the polished mahogany desk, her fingers clutching the edge of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "That's impossible," she whispered. "He's the father of my children." The lawyer adjusted his glasses, avoiding her gaze. "According to the will, Mr. Blackwood specifically stated that any unacknowledged children shall have no claim to the Blackwood estate or assets. I'm afraid that includes your twins." Victoria felt the room spin around her. 18 years. 18 years she had raised Emma and Ethan alone after Richard had walked away from their marriage without ever knowing she was carrying twins. 18 years of birthdays, school plays, and midnight fevers handled single-handedly while Richard Blackwood built his billion-dollar empire and started a new family. And now he was dead, leaving her children his flesh and blood with nothing, not even an acknowledgement of their existence. "This isn't over," Victoria said, rising from her chair with newfound determination. "Richard may have abandoned us in life, but I won't let him erase us in death. Have you ever had your entire world shattered in a single moment?" For Victoria Harrington, that moment came in a sterile lawyer's office, when she discovered her billionaire ex-husband had written their children out of his will, children he never publicly acknowledged. But what Richard Blackwood never counted on was Victoria's fierce determination to fight for what her twins deserved, even if it meant uncovering secrets that powerful people wanted buried forever. If you're new here, I'm Mr. Sterling, and this is a story about a woman who refused to let her children be forgotten. Subscribe now and join me on this journey of betrayal, discovery, and the lengths one mother will go to for justice. Victoria Harrington had always been drawn to beautiful things. As a design student from a modest background, she had an eye for potential, seeing what could be rather than what was. Perhaps that's why, at 23, she had been so captivated by Richard Blackwood when they first met at the annual Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala. Victoria had been there on a scholarship, helping with the event design. Richard, heir to the Blackwood real estate empire, had been a patron. Their eyes met across the room as Victoria adjusted a floral arrangement, and something electric passed between them. By the end of the evening, they had slipped away from the crowd to walk through the moonlit sculpture garden, talking until security politely informed them the museum was closing. "You see the world differently," Richard had told her. His voice filled with wonder as Victoria described how she would have designed the space differently. "Most people in my circle just see dollar signs or status. You see beauty and possibility." 3 months later, they were engaged, despite the concerns of both families. Victoria's parents worried their daughter was being swept off her feet by wealth and charm. The Blackwoods made it clear they had expected Richard to marry someone from their social stratum, preferably the daughter of a business associate who understood the demands of their world. But Richard and Victoria were in love, or so they believed. Their wedding was the social event of the season, Victoria in a gown she had designed herself, Richard beaming with pride as she walked down the aisle. The first 2 years were everything Victoria had dreamed of. They traveled the world, Richard taking her to architectural wonders that inspired her design work. Victoria put her budding career on hold to support Richard, as he took on more responsibility in the family business, hosting dinner parties for clients and creating the perfect home environment for a rising business star. "We're a team," Richard would say, kissing her forehead as they lay in bed after another successful evening entertaining potential investors. "I couldn't do any of this without you, Victoria." She believed him. Even as the dinner parties became more frequent and Richard's absences grew longer, she believed they were building something together. When Richard decided to branch out from his family's company and start his own development firm, Victoria was his biggest supporter, converting their home office into a workspace where they would stay up late strategizing. But success changed Richard in ways Victoria hadn't anticipated. As Blackwood Independent Ventures took off, Richard became increasingly consumed with work. Their conversations, once flowing with ideas and dreams, became briefer, focused on schedules and social obligations. Victoria found herself alone more often, maintaining their image while Richard expanded his empire. "It's just temporary," he would assure her when she expressed concern about their drifting relationship. "Once I get the Singapore deal closed, we'll take that trip to the Maldives I promised. Just us." The Singapore deal closed, but the Maldives trip never materialized. Instead, there was always another deal, another crisis, Another reason why Richard needed to be in the office rather than at home with his wife. Victoria tried to recapture his attention by suggesting they start a family. To her surprise, Richard seemed enthusiastic about the idea. "A son to carry on the Blackwood name," he said, his eyes lighting up for the first time in months. "Or a daughter, with your talent and beauty. Yes, it's time." For a few precious weeks, their marriage rekindled. Richard came home earlier. They talked about nursery designs and schools, and Victoria felt like they were partners again. When she missed her period, they celebrated with champagne. Richard drinking his, Victoria pretending to sip hers until they could confirm with a test. The positive pregnancy test brought tears to both their eyes. Richard placed his hand on Victoria's still flat stomach, whispering promises to their unborn child. For a moment, Victoria believed they had found their way back to each other. But as her body changed, Richard's attention waned again. The morning sickness that kept Victoria in bed meant she couldn't host client dinners. Her fatigue made her less enthusiastic about attending business functions. Richard began attending events alone, coming home later and later, sometimes not at all. "It's a crucial time for the business," he explained when Victoria confronted him about his absences. "The Tokyo expansion won't happen by itself. I'm doing this for our future, for the baby's future." Victoria tried to understand. She focused on her pregnancy, on designing the perfect nursery, on preparing for their child. When Richard announced he needed to go to Tokyo for 2 weeks to finalize the expansion, she didn't argue, though she was already 7 months along. "I'll be back before you know it," Richard promised, kissing her goodbye. "Take care of yourself and little Junior." 2 weeks stretched into 3 with minimal communication. Victoria left messages that went unreturned. When she finally reached Richard's assistant, she was told he was in meetings and would call back. The call never came. Instead, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, a courier delivered an envelope containing divorce papers and a cashier's check for $5 million, a fortune to most, but a pittance compared to Richard's wealth. Victoria collapsed on the foyer floor, the divorce papers clutched in her trembling hands, her other hand cradling her swollen belly. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when they were about to become parents. She called Richard's cell phone repeatedly, each call going straight to voicemail. She called his office, his assistant, even his parents' home. No one would put her through to him. Finally, Richard sent a text message. "I'm sorry, Victoria. I'm not ready for this life. The settlement is generous. Please don't make this difficult." That same afternoon, Victoria went into premature labor from the stress. Alone in the back of a taxi rushing to the hospital, she prayed her baby would be okay. During an emergency ultrasound, the technician gave her news that made her world spin even faster. "Mrs. Blackwood, did you know you're carrying twins?" Victoria gave birth to Emma and Ethan Harrington. She had already decided to revert to her maiden name after 18 hours of labor with only a hastily called friend by her side. They were small but healthy, with identical tufts of dark hair and their father's distinctive green eyes. As Victoria held her newborns, exhausted but overwhelmed with love, she made a decision. Richard had chosen to walk away. He had abandoned her when she needed him most, not even bothering to learn he had 2 children, not 1. She would not chase after a man who could do that. She would not beg him to love his own children. The divorce was finalized quickly, with Richard's high-powered attorneys ensuring the proceedings remained private. Victoria signed the papers without contesting the terms. The $5 million would provide security for her and the twins, at least for a while. Her pride prevented her from demanding more, from revealing the existence of the twins to force child support. "He doesn't deserve to know them," she told her concerned parents when they suggested she fight for more support. "If he wanted to be their father, he would have returned my calls." Victoria moved out of the penthouse apartment she had shared with Richard, finding a modest but comfortable home in a family-friendly neighborhood across town. She legally changed the twins' last name to Harrington and began the challenging journey of single motherhood. The first year was a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and tears, both the baby's and her own. Victoria's parents helped when they could, but they lived in another state and had their own health concerns. Friends drifted away, unable to relate to her new life, or uncomfortable with the scandal of her high-profile divorce. When the twins were 18 months old, Victoria's design portfolio caught the attention of a boutique interior design firm. They offered her a part-time position that allowed her to work primarily from home. It wasn't the glamorous career she had once envisioned, but it kept her creative skills sharp while giving her the flexibility to be present for her children. As Emma and Ethan grew, Victoria watched for signs of Richard in them. Emma had his artistic eye, seeing patterns and possibilities in everything around her. Ethan had his analytical mind, methodically solving problems beyond his years. Both had inherited his determination, a trait Victoria alternately blessed and cursed. "Mommy, why don't we have a daddy like Michael does?" Ethan asked one day after a playdate when he was 5. Victoria had prepared for this question, but it still felt like a knife to her heart. Some families have a mommy and daddy. Some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies. And some, like ours, have just a mommy who loves them very much. "But where is our daddy?" Emma persisted, her green eyes so like Richard's wide with curiosity. Victoria took a deep breath. "Your daddy lives far away. He had important work to do, so he couldn't stay with us." "Will he come visit someday?" Ethan asked. Victoria pulled both children into her lap, holding them close. "I don't know, sweetheart. But what I do know is that we have each other, and that's what matters most." As the years passed, Victoria built a successful design business, specializing in family-friendly luxury spaces. Her unique perspective as a single mother gave her insights that wealthy clients appreciated, creating homes that were both beautiful and livable. Word of her talent spread, and by the time the twins were 10, Victoria Harrington Designs had a waiting list and a small but dedicated staff. She never dated seriously, though there were occasional relationships. Something always held her back from full commitment, perhaps fear of being abandoned again, or simply the all-consuming nature of raising twins while running a business. The twins thrived despite Richard's absence. Emma showed remarkable artistic talent, her paintings winning school competitions and eventually hanging in local galleries. Ethan excelled academically, particularly in mathematics and economics, joining business clubs and starting a small lawn mowing enterprise by age 12. Victoria carefully preserved their childhood, creating photo albums, saving artwork and report cards, recording milestones. Sometimes, late at night, she would look at these mementos and wonder if Richard ever thought about what he had missed, if he ever regretted walking away from the possibility of knowing these extraordinary children. She kept tabs on Richard's life through business news and social media. 5 years after their divorce, he had married Sophia Winters, a former model turned philanthropist. 3 years later, they had a son, Alexander. Richard's business continued to expand globally, his name becoming synonymous with luxury development. Occasionally, Victoria would see him in magazine photos at charity events, Sophia on his arm, looking every bit the perfect power couple. Victoria never told the twins about their half-brother. She never showed them pictures of Richard or explained that their father was one of the wealthiest developers in the country. When they asked more specific questions as they grew older, she gave them minimal information that he had been ambitious and charming, that their relationship had ended before he knew about the pregnancy, that some people weren't ready for the responsibility of parenthood. "Is that why you never told him about us?" Emma asked when she was 15, more perceptive than Victoria had given her credit for. Victoria hesitated, then nodded. "I tried to reach him when I found out I was pregnant. He had already decided to move on with his life. I thought it would be better for you both to have no father than one who didn't want to be involved." "Do you think he would have wanted us if he'd known?" Ethan asked, his expression unreadable. Victoria's heart ached at the question. "I don't know, sweetheart. I hope he would have. But what I do know is that not having him in our lives doesn't diminish who you are. You're both extraordinary, and I couldn't be prouder of the people you're becoming." The twins seemed to accept this explanation, though Victoria occasionally caught them looking at business magazines when Richard was featured, or searching his name online when they thought she wasn't aware. By the time Emma and Ethan turned 18, Victoria had built a life she was proud of. Her design business had expanded to include commercial spaces, with a signature style that was highly sought after. The twins were preparing to leave for college, Emma to Rhode Island School of Design on a partial scholarship, Ethan to the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, having earned a prestigious merit scholarship. To celebrate their high school graduation and 18th birthday, Victoria planned a special dinner at their favorite restaurant. As they sat at their table, Victoria presented each twin with a small wrapped box. "I'm so proud of both of you," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "These are just small tokens to remind you of home when you're away at college." Emma opened her box to find a delicate silver pendant with an artist's palette charm. Ethan's contained a sleek watch with an inscription on the back. Time reveals our true potential. Mom, these are beautiful, Emma said, immediately putting on her necklace. You've given us everything, Ethan added, his voice thick with emotion as he fastened the watch on his wrist. We wouldn't be here without you. Victoria smiled through her tears. You've given me more than you'll ever know. Being your mother has been the greatest privilege of my life. As they enjoyed their meal, discussing plans for the summer before college, Victoria's phone buzzed with a news alert. She normally ignored notifications during family time, but something made her glance down at the screen. The headline made her blood run cold. Real estate magnate Richard Blackwood dies at 48. Victoria set her phone face down on the table, her hands suddenly trembling. Richard was dead. The man who had once been her everything, who had fathered her children and then vanished from their lives, was gone forever. Mom, are you okay? Emma asked, noticing her mother's sudden pallor. Yes, just a work message, Victoria lied, forcing a smile. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow. She made it through the rest of dinner on autopilot, laughing at the twins' jokes and discussing dorm room decor, all while her mind raced with the news of Richard's death. Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed, Victoria sat alone in her living room with a glass of wine, reading the news reports. Richard had died of an apparent heart attack in his office. He was survived by his wife Sophia and their son Alexander, age 10. The article detailed his business accomplishments, philanthropic efforts, and plans for the company's future. There was no mention of a first wife or other children. Victoria wasn't surprised by the omission, but it stung nonetheless. In death, as in life, Richard had erased her and the twins from his narrative. The funeral was scheduled for 3 days later at St. Patrick's Cathedral, a grand send-off for one of the city's most prominent businessmen. Victoria had no intention of attending until she saw Emma standing in her doorway late the following evening. I found the news about Richard Blackwood, Emma said quietly. He was our father, wasn't he? Victoria sighed, patting the space beside her on the sofa. Yes, how did you know? Ethan and I have suspected for years, Emma admitted as she sat down. The timing matched. His eyes were just like ours. And once, when you were out, we found an old photo of you two in the back of your closet. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. I should have been more honest with you both. Why weren't you? Ethan's voice came from the hallway. He entered the living room and sat on Victoria's other side. At first, to protect you from rejection, Victoria explained. Later it seemed easier to let sleeping dogs lie. He had his new family. We had built our own life. We want to go to the funeral, Ethan said firmly. Victoria looked between her children, seeing the determination in their expressions. Are you sure? It will be very public. The press will be there. He was our father, Emma said simply. Even if he didn't know us, we should be there. Victoria looked at her children, no longer children but young adults, making their own decisions. She saw Richard in their determined expressions, in the set of their jaws. All right, she agreed reluctantly. But we'll stay in the background. This isn't the time or place for revelations. The day of the funeral dawned clear and crisp. Victoria dressed in a simple black dress, helping Emma select appropriate attire while Ethan donned the dark suit he'd worn to graduation. They looked so grown up, so composed, that Victoria's heart ached with pride and sorrow. They arrived at the cathedral as the service was beginning, slipping into seats near the back. The massive space was filled with New York's elite business associates, politicians, celebrities, all come to pay respects to Richard Blackwood. At the front, Victoria could see Sophia, elegant in her grief, one arm around young Alexander, whose small shoulders shook with sobs. As eulogies were delivered extolling Richard's business acumen, philanthropy, and devotion to family, Victoria felt Emma stiffen beside her. Devoted family man? Emma whispered incredulously. He abandoned us before we were even born. Victoria squeezed her daughter's hand. People are complicated, Emma. The Richard they knew wasn't the same man I married. After the service, mourners filed past the family to offer condolences. Victoria intended to lead the twins directly out a side door, avoiding the receiving line entirely, but they were momentarily separated in the crowd. When Victoria spotted them again, her heart stopped. Emma and Ethan stood frozen at the edge of the center aisle, directly in the sight line of Richard's mother, Eleanor Blackwood. The elderly woman was staring at the twins with an expression of shock, her hand clutching the arm of her younger son, James. Victoria pushed through the crowd, reaching her children just as Eleanor Blackwood approached them, James at her side. "Those eyes," Eleanor whispered, looking from Emma to Ethan. "Richard's eyes." Victoria stepped protectively in front of the twins. "Mrs. Blackwood, this isn't the place." "Victoria Harrington," Eleanor interrupted, recognition dawning. "Richard's first wife." James Blackwood studied the twins with undisguised curiosity. My God, they looked just like Richard at that age. "Who are these people, Mother?" Sophia had appeared beside Eleanor, Alexander clutching her hand, his eyes red from crying. Victoria took a deep breath. "We were just leaving. Our condolences on your loss." "Wait," Eleanor commanded, her voice surprisingly strong for a woman in her 80s. "These children, they're Richard's, aren't they?" The small group had attracted attention. Nearby mourners were watching the exchange with interest. Victoria could see a few people taking out their phones, no doubt recognizing the potential for scandal. "Yes," Victoria admitted quietly. "Emma and Ethan are Richard's children. He didn't know about them. We should go." "Didn't know?" Eleanor's voice rose slightly. "How could he not know his own children?" "Mother, please," James urged, noticing the growing audience. "This isn't the time or place." Sophia's face had gone pale, her eyes moving between the twins and her son. "Alexander, go with Uncle James for a moment." "But Mom," the boy protested. "Now, Alexander," Sophia insisted, her voice brooking no argument. James led the reluctant boy away as Sophia turned back to Victoria and the twins. "How old are they?" she asked, her voice controlled but strained. 18, Victoria answered. "They just graduated high school." Something flashed in Sophia's eyes, calculation, perhaps, or realization. "We should discuss this privately, not here." Eleanor was still staring at the twins. "All these years," she murmured. "Grandchildren I never knew." "Mrs. Blackwood, we really should be going," Victoria insisted, uncomfortable with the attention they were attracting. "No," Eleanor said firmly. "You will come to the house after the reception. We have much to discuss." Before Victoria could refuse, a funeral director approached, gently guiding Eleanor and Sophia toward the waiting limousines. James returned, giving Victoria a business card. "The family home, 4 p.m., he said quietly. "I think it would be in everyone's best interest if you came." Victoria took the card automatically, then led the twins out of the cathedral and into the bright sunlight. "Well, that wasn't how I expected this to go," Ethan said, his attempt at humor falling flat. "Are we going to their house?" Emma asked as they walked toward the subway. Victoria looked at the business card in her hand. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Mom," Ethan said firmly, "we've spent our entire lives not knowing that side of our family. Don't we deserve a chance to meet them now?" Victoria looked at her son so logical, so determined. "They didn't know about you either, Ethan. This is a shock for everyone. They're grieving." "So are we," Emma said quietly. "We're grieving the father we never had the chance to know." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. How could she argue with that? "All right, we'll go. But if it becomes uncomfortable, we leave immediately. Agreed?" The twins nodded in unison. The Blackwood family home was a stately mansion on the Upper East Side, its limestone facade imposing behind wrought iron gates. Victoria had been there only once before, when Richard had reluctantly brought her to meet his parents early in their relationship. The memory of Eleanor Blackwood's cold assessment and Richard Sr.'s barely concealed disapproval came flooding back as their taxi pulled up to the entrance. A butler met them at the door, escorting them to a formal sitting room where Eleanor, James, and Sophia waited. Alexander was nowhere to be seen. "Thank you for coming," James said, rising to greet them. He was the only one who seemed genuinely welcoming. Eleanor remained seated, her posture rigid. "So these are Richard's children," she said, her gaze moving between Emma and Ethan. "The resemblance is remarkable. Please, sit." Sophia gestured to the sofa across from her. Her perfect composure had returned, though her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. Victoria sat between the twins, feeling like they were facing a tribunal rather than family. "I think we deserve an explanation," Eleanor said without preamble. How is it possible that Richard didn't know he had children? Victoria straightened her spine. I tried to tell him. When I discovered I was pregnant, Richard was already pulling away from our marriage. He went to Tokyo on business when I was 7 months along. While he was gone, I received divorce papers and a settlement offer. That doesn't sound like my son, Eleanor said sharply. With all due respect, Mrs. Blackwood, you didn't know your son as well as you think, Victoria replied, keeping her voice level. I called his office repeatedly. I left messages. He never responded except a text that he wasn't ready for this life and asking me not to make the divorce difficult. And you didn't think to mention you were carrying his child? Eleanor pressed. Children, Emma corrected quietly. We're twins. Eleanor's expression softened slightly as she looked at Emma. Yes, of course. Twins. I went into premature labor the day I received the divorce papers, Victoria continued. That's when I learned I was carrying twins. By then, Richard had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me or our marriage. I made the decision to raise Emma and Ethan on my own, rather than force them on a father who had walked away. James leaned forward. Victoria, are you saying Richard never knew about the twins? Not even after they were born? Victoria hesitated. I never told him directly. The divorce was finalized quickly. I changed my name back to Harrington and gave the twins my surname. I assumed if Richard wanted to know about his children, he would have responded to my calls. Sophia, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Did you ever consider that Richard might have changed his mind if he'd known? Every day, for 18 years, Victoria admitted, her voice catching. But he made his choice. I had to make mine. And now you've come forward, just as Richard has died, Eleanor said, suspicion evident in her tone. Convenient timing. Victoria felt a flash of anger. We came to pay our respects, nothing more. The twins wanted to see their father laid to rest. We had no intention of approaching the family. It's true, Mrs. Blackwood, Ethan said, speaking for the first time. We only learned who our father was yesterday. When the news of his death broke, we asked our mother to bring us to the funeral. Eleanor studied Ethan, noting his composed demeanor and articulate speech. You seem like a serious young man. I've been accepted to Wharton on a merit scholarship, Ethan replied. I plan to study finance and business management. A flicker of approval crossed Eleanor's face before she turned to Emma. And you, young lady? What are your plans? I'll be attending Rhode Island School of Design in the fall, Emma answered. I'm an artist. Like your mother, Eleanor observed, glancing at Victoria. And like our father, Emma added. I've read that Richard had an eye for architectural design, that he could visualize spaces in a way others couldn't. Eleanor's expression softened further. Yes, he did, even as a boy. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Victoria could feel the weight of unasked questions, of judgments being formed. Finally, James cleared his throat. There's another matter we should discuss. The reading of Richard's will is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Given what we've learned today, I think it would be appropriate for Victoria and the twins to attend. Victoria shook her head. That's not necessary. We didn't come here seeking anything. Nevertheless, Sophia said, her voice surprisingly firm, you should be there. Richard's attorney should be made aware of this situation. Victoria studied Sophia's face, trying to read her intentions. Was this a genuine gesture or something else? What time? Victoria asked finally. 10 o'clock, at the offices of Hargrove and Bennett, James replied, writing the address on the back of another business card. I'll let them know you'll be attending. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor rose from her chair with some difficulty. She approached the twins, looking at them with a mixture of regret and wonder. I wish I had known, she said softly. All these years. So do we, Mrs. Blackwood, Emma replied gently. Eleanor reached out tentatively, touching Emma's cheek. You have his smile. Both of you do. Victoria watched the interaction with a lump in her throat. Whatever Richard's failings, these were the twins' grandparents, their blood relatives. Perhaps some good could come from this meeting after all. As they left the Blackwood mansion, Victoria felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. Tomorrow would bring the reading of Richard's will, a document created by a man who, as far as she knew, had never acknowledged the existence of Emma and Ethan. Do you think he left us anything? Ethan asked as they rode the subway home. Victoria squeezed his hand. I don't know, sweetheart, but please don't get your hopes up. Richard made his choices long ago. It's not about the money, Emma insisted. It's about recognition, about him acknowledging that we exist. Victoria nodded, understanding her daughter's need for validation. Just remember that your worth isn't determined by what Richard did or didn't do. You've both achieved so much without his name or his money. That night, Victoria barely slept. She replayed the day's events in her mind, wondering if she had made the right decisions 18 years ago. Should she have fought harder to make Richard acknowledge his children? Should she have demanded proper child support instead of accepting the divorce settlement and walking away? The next morning, Victoria dressed carefully in a tailored navy suit, one of her own designs that projected confidence and professionalism. Emma chose a simple black dress, while Ethan wore his graduation suit again. They looked like what they were, a family united, facing uncertainty together. The offices of Hargrove and Bennett occupied the top floor of a sleek midtown skyscraper. The reception area was all marble and glass, with views of Central Park in the distance. Victoria gave her name to the receptionist, who directed them to a large conference room where the Blackwood family was already assembled. Eleanor sat at one end of the long table, James beside her. Sophia was seated across from them, Alexander fidgeting in the chair next to her. Several men in expensive suits, executives from Blackwood Enterprises, Victoria, assumed occupied other seats. All conversations stopped when Victoria and the twins entered. Miss Harrington greeted an older man at the head of the table, rising to his feet. I'm Walter Bennett, Richard's personal attorney. I understand you were Richard's first wife. Yes, Victoria confirmed, guiding Emma and Ethan to empty chairs near the door. And these are our children, Emma and Ethan. A murmur ran through the room. One of the executives leaned over to whisper to another, both glancing at the twins with undisguised curiosity. I see, Bennett said, his expression revealing nothing. This is unexpected. Richard never mentioned having other children. He didn't know, Victoria replied simply. Bennett looked as though he wanted to ask more questions, but instead consulted his notes. Well, as you're here at the family's invitation, we'll proceed. I must note, however, that the will I'm about to read was executed 6 months ago and makes no provision for previously unknown heirs. Victoria nodded, squeezing each twin's hand under the table. We understand. Bennett cleared his throat and began reading the will. Richard's estate was substantial, even larger than Victoria had imagined. The bulk of his personal assets, valued at over $3 billion, went to Sophia and Alexander. His controlling interest in Blackwood Enterprises was divided, with Sophia receiving 30%, Alexander 30% held in trust until he turned 25, and the remaining 40% divided among key executives to ensure the company's continued operation. There were specific bequests to Eleanor, James, various charities, and longtime employees. Bennett read each item methodically, his voice a monotone that belied the enormous sums being distributed. Victoria felt Emma's grip tighten as the reading continued with no mention of them. Ethan's face remained impassive, but she could see the muscle working in his jaw just like Richard's used to do when he was controlling his emotions. Finally, Bennett reached the end of the document. And to any other persons claiming to be heirs or having claim against my estate, I leave the sum of $1, it being my intention to limit any bequest to those persons specifically named herein. The words hung in the air like a slap. Victoria felt sick. Not only had Richard failed to acknowledge Emma and Ethan, he had specifically included language to disinherit any unknown children. That concludes the reading of the will, Bennett said, closing the folder. Are there any questions? Victoria was about to rise, eager to remove her children from this humiliating situation, when James spoke up. Walter, given what we've learned about Richard's children from his first marriage, what legal options exist for amending the distribution? Bennett looked uncomfortable. The will is quite clear, Mr. Blackwood. Richard specifically included language to exclude unnamed heirs. But he didn't know about them, James persisted. Surely that changes things. I'm afraid not, Bennett replied. The law gives testators broad latitude to distribute their assets as they see fit, even if that means disinheriting children. Victoria stood, her dignity intact despite the churning in her stomach. Thank you for including us. but we should go." "Emma? Ethan?" The twins rose, their faces composed despite the rejection they had just experienced. Victoria had never been prouder of them. "Wait," Sophia said suddenly. "There's something you should know." All eyes turned to Richard's widow. She looked directly at Victoria, her expression unreadable. Richard knew about the twins. The room went completely silent. Victoria felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. "That's impossible," she whispered. Sophia reached into her handbag and withdrew a small leather notebook. This was Richard's personal journal. He kept it in his safe. "After his death, I found entries." She paused, glancing at Alexander, who was watching with wide eyes. "James, perhaps you could take Alexander to get a snack from the break room?" James nodded, understanding the need to shield the boy from whatever was coming. "Come on, sport, let's find something to eat." Once they had left, Sophia opened the journal to a marked page. "Richard hired a private investigator to find you about 5 years after your divorce. He discovered you had twins. His twins. He kept tabs on them from a distance." Victoria felt dizzy.
"He knew? All this time he knew and never said anything?"
"According to his journal, he convinced himself it was better to stay away," Sophia continued. "That they had a good life with you, that his sudden appearance would only complicate things." "That's not his decision to make," Victoria said, her voice shaking with anger. "They were his children. He had a responsibility to them." "I agree," Sophia said, surprising everyone. "When I discovered this journal after his death, I was shocked. Richard and I had our issues, but I never imagined he was capable of this level of deception." Eleanor Blackwood looked stricken.
"He knew I had grandchildren and kept it from me? From all of us?"
"There's more," Sophia said, turning a page in the journal. "Richard established anonymous trust funds for both Emma and Ethan when they were 10. The trusts were designed to activate when they turned 21, providing for their education and giving them a financial start in life." Victoria felt her knees weaken and sank back into her chair.
"I don't understand. If he cared enough to set up trusts, why didn't he want to know them? Why exclude them from his will?"
Sophia hesitated, glancing at Eleanor. Richard's relationship with his father was complicated. Richard Sr. made it clear that if Richard ever acknowledged children from his first marriage, he would be cut out of the family business entirely. "My husband said that?" Eleanor asked, her voice faint. "According to Richard's journal, yes," Sophia confirmed. Even after his father died, Richard felt bound by that threat. He believed that acknowledging Emma and Ethan would destabilize the company, affecting thousands of employees and shareholders. "So he chose his company over his children," Emma said, speaking for the first time since the will was read. Her voice was steady, but Victoria could hear the hurt beneath her composure. "It appears so," Sophia admitted. "I'm not defending his choice. I'm just telling you what I found." Ethan leaned forward, his analytical mind clearly working. "These trusts you mentioned, how substantial are they?" Sophia consulted the journal again. $5 million each, with additional funds for graduate education if desired. "That's a fraction of what Alexander will receive," Ethan observed, not accusingly but matter-of-factly. "Yes," Sophia acknowledged. "It is." Victoria stood again, her anger overriding her shock. "This changes everything." Richard knew about Emma and Ethan. He deliberately chose not to acknowledge them publicly, while secretly providing a token inheritance. That's not just abandonment, it's calculated erasure. "Miss Harrington," Bennett interjected, "while this information is certainly disturbing, it doesn't change the legal standing of the will." Richard's intentions were clearly stated. "His intentions were based on a lie," Victoria countered. "He excluded his children not because he didn't know about them, but because he was too cowardly to acknowledge them." "Mom," Ethan said quietly, placing a hand on her arm, "let's think about this strategically." Victoria took a deep breath, recognizing the wisdom in her son's words. Getting emotional wouldn't help their situation. "Mr. Bennett," Ethan addressed the lawyer directly, "in your professional opinion, would these revelations provide grounds for contesting the will?" Bennett looked uncomfortable. "Potentially. The fact that Richard knew about you but deliberately excluded you might constitute what we call fraud on the court. It's a complex legal area." "We'll need to consult our own attorney," Victoria decided. "This isn't something we can resolve today." Eleanor Blackwood, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. That won't be necessary. All eyes turned to the elderly matriarch. Richard's actions were unconscionable. Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength. I won't have my grandchildren treated this way, even posthumously. She turned to Bennett. Walter, I want you to prepare documents transferring 20% of my Blackwood Enterprises shares to Emma and Ethan, divided equally between them. A shocked silence fell over the room. Mother, James began cautiously, that's an extremely significant portion of your estate. I'm well aware of what I'm giving away, James. Eleanor replied sharply. These children have been denied their birthright for 18 years. I intend to begin correcting that injustice immediately. Victoria was stunned. Mrs. Blackwood, that's incredibly generous, but it's not generosity, Miss Harrington. It's justice, Eleanor interrupted. And long overdue. Sophia had been watching this exchange with an unreadable expression. Now she spoke. Her voice measured. I support Eleanor's decision, and I would like to propose something additional. She turned to face Emma and Ethan directly. Richard's actions were inexcusable. As his widow and Alexander's mother, I want you both to know that you are welcome in our family. Alexander should know his siblings, and while I can't undo Richard's choices, I can ensure that you receive a fair portion of his personal estate as well. Victoria felt tears threatening. After years of raising her children alone, after the shock and hurt of today's revelations, this unexpected acceptance was overwhelming. Why would you do this? She asked Sophia. You don't owe us anything. Sophia's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine emotion. Because family matters. Because Alexander deserves to know his brother and sister. And because it's what Richard should have done himself. Emma, who had remained remarkably composed throughout the meeting, finally spoke. Thank you, both of you. But this isn't about money for us. It's about acknowledgement, about knowing where we come from. The money is part of that acknowledgement, Eleanor said firmly. The Blackwood fortune was built by your ancestors too. You deserve your share. Bennett cleared his throat. If I may suggest, rather than making immediate transfers, perhaps we should arrange a proper meeting with all parties and their legal representatives. These are significant financial decisions that shouldn't be made in the heat of emotion. For once, I agree with Walter, James said. Not because I oppose what Mother and Sophia are suggesting, but because we need to do this right. Emma and Ethan deserve proper legal protection and representation. Victoria nodded, recognizing the wisdom in this approach. That seems reasonable. In the meantime, perhaps we could arrange for the twins to spend some time with Alexander? And with you, Mrs. Blackwood? Family is about more than financial assets. Eleanor's stern face softened into a genuine smile. I would like that very much. As they prepared to leave the attorney's office, Victoria felt a strange mixture of emotions, anger at Richard's deception, gratitude for his family's unexpected acceptance, and a lingering sadness for what might have been if Richard had made different choices. Outside on the sidewalk, Emma linked her arm through Victoria's. Are you okay, Mom? Victoria looked at her beautiful, perceptive daughter. I should be asking you that question. You both just learned some difficult truths about your father. We learned that he was flawed, Ethan said, joining them. But we also learned that we have family who want to know us. That's something, isn't it? Victoria pulled both her children close. These remarkable young adults she had raised alone. It's everything. And no matter what happens with the Blackwoods, or the will, or any of it, I want you both to remember something. You are extraordinary people because of who you are, not because of your last name or your inheritance. We know, Mom, Emma said softly. You've shown us that every day of our lives. As they walked toward the subway, Victoria glanced back at the towering office building where their lives had just changed irrevocably. Richard might have failed his children in life, but perhaps, through the actions of his family, he could begin to make amends in death. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of meetings with attorneys, financial advisors, and the Blackwood family. Victoria insisted on hiring independent counsel for Emma and Ethan, wanting to ensure their interests were properly protected. Eleanor Blackwood proved true to her word, transferring significant Blackwood Enterprises shares to her newly discovered grandchildren. Sophia arranged for a portion of Richard's personal estate to be placed in trusts for the twins, separate from the ones Richard had secretly established. More meaningful than the financial arrangements, however, were the personal connections being formed. Alexander, initially shy and confused about his new siblings, quickly warmed to Emma and Ethan. Despite the age difference, he looked up to them with undisguised admiration, particularly Ethan, who patiently taught him chess and discussed business concepts in terms the 10-year-old could understand. Eleanor invited the twins to the family home regularly, sharing stories about Richard's childhood and showing them family photo albums. Victoria was included in these gatherings, Eleanor seemingly determined to make amends for the past. "He was so much like you at this age," Eleanor told Ethan one afternoon, showing him a photo of Richard at 16, proudly displaying a business plan he'd created for a school project. "Always thinking, always planning." "Did he play any instruments?" Emma asked, noticing a piano in the background of several photos. "Piano and violin," Eleanor confirmed. "He had quite a talent, though he set it aside when he entered business school. Said there wasn't time for both music and finance." Victoria, listening from across the room, felt a pang. She had forgotten Richard's musical side, one of the things that had initially drawn them together. How many other aspects of himself had he compartmentalized and set aside in pursuit of his business ambitions? James Blackwood proved to be an unexpected ally, helping Ethan understand the complexities of the family business and offering guidance on his upcoming studies at Wharton. "You have your father's mind for strategy," he told Ethan after they discussed a recent acquisition, "but I think you have your mother's heart. That combination will serve you well." Even Sophia, who had every reason to resent Victoria and the twins, showed remarkable grace. She invited Emma to help redesign Alexander's bedroom, recognizing the young woman's design talent and giving her a meaningful project to connect with her half-brother. "He talks about you constantly," Sophia told Emma as they reviewed fabric samples. "You've made quite an impression on him." "He's a great kid," Emma replied sincerely. "You've done an amazing job with him." Sophia's carefully maintained composure slipped slightly. "Thank you for saying that. This situation, it would be easy to see me as the villain in the story. The second wife, who replaced your mother. That's not how we see it at all," Emma assured her. "My mom always taught us that people are complex, that most of us are just doing our best with the information we have." Sophia studied Emma thoughtfully. "Your mother raised you well, both of you." "She did everything," Emma agreed. "She was both parents to us." As summer progressed and the legal arrangements were finalized, Victoria found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. Richard's death had revealed his deception, but had also opened doors to family connections the twins might never have known otherwise. One evening, as Victoria sat on her small balcony enjoying the summer breeze, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Miss Harrington? This is Walter Bennett." Victoria frowned. The final paperwork had been signed the previous week. What could Richard's attorney want now? "Yes, Mr. Bennett? Something has come to light that I believe you should know about," Bennett said, his typically formal tone sounding strained. "In the process of transferring assets to the trusts for Emma and Ethan, we discovered a safe deposit box in Richard's name at Manhattan Trust. It contained a letter addressed to you and the twins." Victoria's heart skipped a beat. "A letter? From Richard?" "Yes. According to the bank records, he rented the box 3 years ago. The letter is dated around the same time." "I see," Victoria said, trying to process this information. "And you have this letter now?" "I do. I'd like to deliver it personally, if that's acceptable. It seems significant." Victoria agreed to meet Bennett the following morning at her office. After hanging up, she sat motionless, staring at the city lights. A letter from Richard, written 3 years ago. What could he possibly have to say after all this time? She debated whether to tell the twins immediately, but decided to wait until she had read the letter herself. If its contents were hurtful, she wanted to be prepared to support them. Bennett arrived at Victoria's design studio promptly at 10 the next morning, carrying a sealed envelope in a leather portfolio. He handed it to her without ceremony. "I haven't read it," he assured her, "but I feel I should apologize. I've represented Richard for over 20 years. If I had known about Emma and Ethan." "Would you have done anything differently?" Victoria asked, not unkindly. Bennett considered this, then shook his head. "Probably not. Client confidentiality is sacred in my profession, but I would have advised him differently, urged him to acknowledge them properly. "Thank you for bringing this to me," Victoria said, accepting the envelope, "and for your honesty." After Bennett left, Victoria stared at the envelope on her desk. Her name was written on the front, in Richard's distinctive handwriting, bold, slanting slightly to the right. She had once found his handwriting so attractive, so confident. Now it made her stomach clench with anxiety. Taking a deep breath, she carefully opened the envelope and unfolded several pages of heavy stationery. "Victoria," the letter began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and the truth has finally come out about Emma and Ethan." Victoria read the entire letter twice, tears streaming down her face. When she finished, she knew she needed to share it with the twins immediately. This was what they had been seeking all along. Not money or shares or legal recognition, but answers, understanding, their father's voice, speaking directly to them at last. She called them both, asking them to meet her at home as soon as possible. Emma arrived first, having been at a nearby art supply store. Ethan came directly from a meeting with James about his upcoming internship at Blackwood Enterprises. "What's wrong, Mom?" Emma asked, alarmed by Victoria's red-rimmed eyes. "Nothing's wrong," Victoria assured her, "but something important has happened. Mr. Bennett brought me this today." She held up the letter. "It's from your father." The twins exchanged glances, then sat on either side of Victoria on the sofa. "Do you want us to read it alone?" Ethan asked. Victoria shook her head. "I think we should read it together. It's addressed to all three of us." With Emma holding one side of the pages and Ethan the other, Victoria began to read aloud. "Victoria, Emma, and Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and the truth has finally come out about Emma and Ethan. I've imagined this moment countless times over the years, the moment when my greatest failure would be revealed to the world, and more importantly, to you, my children. First, to Victoria, I owe you an apology that words can never adequately express. When you told me you were pregnant, I panicked. I was 28 years old, obsessed with proving myself to my father, and terrified of failing as a parent the way I felt my father had failed me. I convinced myself that you and our child would be better off without me, that the financial settlement would provide security while I focused on building my business. It was the most cowardly decision of my life. When I learned years later that you had given birth to twins, our twins, I was stunned. I hired investigators to check on your welfare, telling myself I just wanted to ensure you were all right. The truth was more complicated. I wanted to see my children, to know them, but I was trapped in a cage of my own making. My father had made it brutally clear that acknowledging children from my failed first marriage would result in my immediate removal from Blackwood Enterprises. By then, thousands of employees depended on the company's success. I told myself that my responsibility to them outweighed my responsibility to children who seemed to be thriving without me. It was another act of cowardice, disguised as duty. To Emma and Ethan, I've watched you from a distance your entire lives. I've attended school plays and soccer games, sitting in the back, leaving before anyone could recognize me. I have a file of your report cards, newspaper clippings of your achievements, photographs taken by private investigators I hired to keep me informed. Emma, your artistic talent takes my breath away. The mural you painted for the Children's Hospital showed not just technical skill, but profound empathy. You have your mother's eye for beauty and her compassionate heart. Ethan, your analytical mind and leadership abilities remind me so much of myself that it's sometimes painful to watch. Your business plan for the neighborhood lawn care service was more sophisticated than proposals I've seen from seasoned executives. I've told myself that you were better off without my complicated presence in your lives, that Victoria was doing an extraordinary job raising you both, that disrupting your family unit would be selfish. But the truth, which I can finally admit as I write this letter, is that I was protecting myself from the pain of facing what I had abandoned, from having to explain my inexcusable choices to two innocent children, from seeing the disappointment in your eyes that I had already imagined 1,000 times. The trusts I established for you both are poor substitutes for a father's presence, I know that. Money cannot replace lost time or missed moments, but they represent my hope that you might someday understand that despite my absence, I did care. I did love you, even if I lacked the courage to show it. Victoria, you have been the parent I could never be: strong, present, and selfless. You've raised our children with values and love that I observed from afar but never had the courage to contribute to directly. Whatever you've told them about me, I'm certain they deserved better than the truth. If my medical prognosis is correct, I won't live to see Emma and Ethan graduate college or begin their careers. I won't see them fall in love or have families of their own. These are the consequences of my choices, and I accept them with profound regret. I've instructed Walter Bennett to deliver this letter only in the event that you and the twins learn about my surveillance and the trust funds. If you're reading this, it means you've already discovered the worst of my deception. I hope that someday you might find it in your hearts to forgive me, though I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. The only thing I did right in this situation was to stay away, once I realized what an extraordinary family you had become without me. Victoria, you gave our children everything I couldn't. For that, I will be eternally grateful. Emma and Ethan, you are my greatest accomplishment, though I can claim no credit for the remarkable people you've become. That honor belongs entirely to your mother. With deepest regrets and enduring love, Richard. When Victoria finished reading, the apartment was silent except for Emma's quiet sobs. Ethan sat perfectly still, his face unreadable, though a muscle worked in his jaw just like Richard's used to do. He watched us, Emma finally whispered. All those years, he was there, watching us, but never speaking to us. Ethan added, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Never acknowledging us. Victoria folded the letter carefully, her own emotions too complex to name. Anger at Richard's continued justifications. Grief for what might have been. Relief that the twins finally had some answers, however inadequate. What do you think? She asked her children gently. How do you feel about what he wrote? Emma wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I don't know. Part of me wants to be angry that he chose his company over us, but another part understands being afraid of failing at something important. Ethan stood abruptly, pacing the small living room. He was a coward, he said flatly. He admits it himself. He had 18 years to make a different choice, and he never did. That's true, Victoria acknowledged. But people are complicated, Ethan. Fear is a powerful motivator, and so is shame. The longer he stayed away, the harder it would have been to come back. Are you defending him? Ethan asked incredulously. Victoria shook her head. No. What he did was wrong. Inexcusable, really. But understanding someone's failings doesn't mean excusing them. It just helps us process them. Emma picked up the letter, rereading portions silently. He says he was at my art show at the children's hospital and at Ethan's soccer games. She looked up at her mother. Did you ever see him? Did you know he was watching us? Never, Victoria said firmly. If I had seen him, I would have confronted him immediately, forced him to make a choice one way or the other. Ethan rejoined them on the sofa, taking the letter from Emma. He mentions a medical prognosis. Do you think he knew he was dying when he wrote this? Victoria considered this. It's possible. Bennett said the letter was written 3 years ago. Richard might have been diagnosed with something then. We should ask Sophia, Emma suggested. She would know if he had health problems. Victoria nodded, though the thought of discussing Richard's medical history with his second wife felt strange. But then, everything about this situation defied normal family dynamics. What do we do with this information? Ethan asked, always the practical one. Does it change anything about the legal arrangements? I don't think so, Victoria replied. The agreements are already signed, but it might change how you feel about accepting them. Emma and Ethan exchanged a look, one of those silent communications that twins sometimes share. I think, Emma said slowly, that I want to use part of my inheritance to establish a scholarship fund for children of single parents. To honor what you did for us, Mom. Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. Emma, that's a beautiful idea. And I want to learn about the business, Ethan added. Not just because it's the family company, but because I want to understand what was so important to him that he chose it over us. Maybe then I can make peace with his decision. Victoria looked at her children with overwhelming pride. Despite everything Richard's abandonment, the recent revelations, the emotional roller coaster of the past few weeks, They were responding with maturity and thoughtfulness beyond their years. "Whatever you decide to do with your inheritance, I'll support you," she assured them. "Just remember that you don't owe Richard or the Blackwood family anything. These choices should be about what you want for your futures." "We know, Mom," Emma said, leaning her head on Victoria's shoulder. "You've always made sure we knew our worth didn't depend on anyone else's validation." The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Victoria wasn't expecting visitors, but when she checked the security camera, she was surprised to see Eleanor Blackwood standing in the hallway, leaning on her cane. Victoria opened the door, concerned by the unexpected visit.
"Mrs. Blackwood, is everything all right?"
Eleanor looked tired but determined. "I hope I'm not intruding. I needed to speak with you and the children." Victoria invited her in, offering her the most comfortable chair in the living room. Emma quickly brought a glass of water, while Ethan hovered nearby, clearly curious about this unannounced visit. "Bennett told me about the letter," Eleanor said without preamble. "He didn't share the contents, but he felt I should know of its existence." Victoria nodded, unsurprised. Bennett seemed determined to ensure transparency now, perhaps to make up for his role in maintaining Richard's secrets. "We just finished reading it," Victoria confirmed. Richard explained some of his reasons for staying away. Eleanor's hands tightened around the handle of her cane. "Did he mention his father? Richard Sr.?" "Yes," Victoria said carefully. "He wrote that your husband threatened to remove him from the company if he acknowledged children from his first marriage." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, pain evident in her expression. "I suspected as much. My husband was a difficult man. Controlling. Obsessed with the company's image and legacy." She looked directly at Emma and Ethan. "But that doesn't excuse what Richard did, or what I did." "What you did?" Emma asked gently. "I knew about you," Eleanor admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not immediately, but eventually. Richard confided in me after his father died. I encouraged him to reach out to you, to make amends, but I didn't insist. I didn't use my influence as his mother or as a major shareholder to force the issue." She looked down at her hands, twisted with arthritis but still elegant. "I was a coward too." The admission hung in the air, another layer of betrayal for the twins to process. Victoria watched them carefully, ready to intervene if the conversation became too painful. But Ethan surprised her by kneeling beside Eleanor's chair, taking one of her gnarled hands in his. "You're here now," he said simply. "That counts for something." Eleanor looked at him with wonder, then at Emma, who had moved to sit on the arm of her chair. "You both have such capacity for forgiveness. I don't deserve it." "Maybe none of us get what we deserve," Emma said thoughtfully. "Good or bad, maybe we just do our best with what we have." Victoria recognized her own words, often repeated to the twins throughout their childhood, coming back in Emma's gentle voice. The cycle of wisdom, passing from one generation to the next. Eleanor reached into her handbag and withdrew a small velvet box. "I brought something for you both. These were Richard's when he was your age. His father gave them to him when he graduated high school, and his grandfather before that." She opened the box to reveal two watches, one clearly masculine with a leather band, the other more delicate with a mother-of-pearl face. "The tradition was to give these to the eldest son and daughter," Eleanor explained. "Richard should have given them to you himself. I'd like to correct that oversight, if you'll accept them." Emma and Ethan looked at the watches, these tangible connections to their paternal heritage, then at each other. "Thank you," Ethan said, carefully taking the men's watch from the box. "I'd be honored to wear it." "Me too," Emma added, slipping the women's watch onto her wrist. "It's beautiful." Eleanor smiled, relief evident in her expression. "There's something else, something I've been considering since we learned about you." She took a deep breath. "I'd like to establish a foundation in your names, the Emma and Ethan Harrington Foundation. It would support arts education and entrepreneurship programs for young people, reflecting your individual talents." Victoria was stunned by the gesture. "Mrs. Blackwood, that's incredibly generous." "It's not generosity," Eleanor insisted, echoing her words from the will reading. "It's justice, and perhaps a small step toward healing." As Eleanor prepared to leave an hour later, having discussed preliminary plans for the foundation, she paused at the door. "Victoria, may I speak with you privately for a moment?" Victoria nodded, stepping into the hallway with the older woman, while the twins remained inside. "I owe you an apology as well," Eleanor said once they were alone. "When Richard brought you home all those years ago, I was cold and judgmental. I saw only that you weren't from our social circle, not the remarkable woman you are." Victoria was surprised by the admission. "That was a long time ago." "Yes, but first impressions matter. They set the tone." Eleanor's eyes, so like Richard's, held genuine regret. "If I had welcomed you properly, if I had stood up to my husband's snobbery, perhaps things would have been different. Perhaps Richard would have felt he could come to us when you told him about the pregnancy." "We can't know that," Victoria said gently. "Richard made his own choices." "Choices influenced by how he was raised," Eleanor countered. "By the values or lack thereof that his father and I instilled in him." She reached out, briefly touching Victoria's arm. "You did what neither of us could do. You raised those children with integrity, compassion, and strength. I hope you know how extraordinary that is." Victoria felt unexpected tears spring to her eyes at this validation from the most unlikely source. "Thank you for saying that." As she watched Eleanor's car pull away from the curb, Victoria felt a strange sense of closure beginning to form. Richard's letter, Eleanor's visit, these were pieces of a puzzle that had been incomplete for 18 years, finally falling into place. Inside, Emma and Ethan were examining their inherited watches, heads bent together in conversation. "Okay?" Victoria asked simply, rejoining them. Emma looked up with a small smile. "Getting there. It's a lot to process." "But we have time," Ethan added, "and we have each other." Victoria sat between her children, these remarkable young adults who had somehow emerged whole and healthy despite the complicated circumstances of their birth and upbringing. "Always," she promised. "We always have each other." In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new normal. Emma and Ethan prepared for their respective colleges, now with the financial security of both Richard's secret trusts and their shares in Blackwood Enterprises. Victoria continued to grow her design business, accepting a major commission to redesign the Blackwood corporate headquarters, a project offered by James as a gesture of respect for her talent. The legal battle Victoria had initially contemplated never materialized. Instead, the Blackwood family had embraced Emma and Ethan, incorporating them into family gatherings and business discussions. Alexander adored his older siblings, particularly Ethan, who patiently taught him chess and discussed business concepts in terms the 10-year-old could understand. One evening, as summer drew to a close and the twins' departure for college loomed, Victoria found Emma sitting on the balcony, looking at the city lights. "Penny, for your thoughts," Victoria said, joining her daughter. Emma smiled, touching the antique watch on her wrist, a connection to the father she had never known in life. "I was just thinking about how differently things might have turned out if Dad had made different choices. If he had been part of our lives from the beginning." Victoria considered this. "We might have had more financial security, certainly. You might have had opportunities we couldn't afford. But we might not have been as close," Emma pointed out. "The three of us against the world that made us who we are." Victoria nodded, understanding what her daughter meant. Their circumstances had forged an unbreakable bond between them. "Do you regret not telling him about us?" Emma asked suddenly. "Not fighting harder to make him acknowledge us?" Victoria had asked herself this question countless times over the years. "Sometimes," she admitted, "especially when money was tight, or when you both asked questions about him that I couldn't answer. But mostly, no. I made the best decision I could with the information I had at the time." "Just like he did," Emma said softly. Victoria looked at her daughter in surprise. "You're very generous to see it that way." Emma shrugged. "His letter helped me understand. Even if I don't fully forgive him yet, he was scared. He made bad choices. But in his own way, he did care about us." From inside the apartment, Ethan called out, "Mom, Emma, Sophia's on the phone. She wants to know if we can all come to dinner tomorrow to discuss the foundation launch." Victoria exchanged a smile with Emma. Life had taken them on an unexpected journey, from abandonment to inheritance, from secrets to truth. Richard's death had revealed his deception, but it also opened doors to family connections the twins might never have known otherwise. As they went inside to speak with Sophia, the woman who might have been their enemy but had instead become an ally, Victoria felt a sense of peace she hadn't expected to find. Richard had failed his children in life, but in death, He had given them something valuable: the truth, however painful, and a connection to their heritage. It wasn't the family story Victoria had imagined when she fell in love with Richard Blackwood all those years ago, but it was their story, complicated, imperfect, and ultimately healing. And for now, that was enough. If you found this story moving, please hit the like button and subscribe to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love for more powerful stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your way forward after betrayal. Share in the comments if you've ever had to rebuild your life after someone let you down. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful futures come from the most painful pasts. The summer passed quickly, with Emma and Ethan dividing their time between preparing for college and getting to know their newfound family. Victoria watched with a mixture of pride and apprehension as her children navigated these complex relationships, finding their place in the Blackwood dynasty while maintaining the values she had instilled in them. The foundation Eleanor had proposed was taking shape, with Emma contributing design ideas for the logo and marketing materials while Ethan worked with financial advisors to establish a sustainable funding structure. Victoria marveled at how naturally her children stepped into these roles, their inherited talents shining through despite Richard's absence in their lives. One afternoon in late August, Victoria was reviewing plans for the Blackwood corporate headquarters redesign when her phone rang. It was James Blackwood. "Victoria, I hope I'm not interrupting," he began, his tone unusually serious. "Not at all," she assured him. "Is everything all right?" There was a pause before James continued. "I've discovered something concerning. Something about Richard's will and the circumstances surrounding it. I think we need to meet in person. Can you come to my office today?" Victoria felt a chill despite the summer heat. "Of course. What time? 3 o'clock? And Victoria, come alone, please. I'd prefer the twins not know about this until we've had a chance to discuss it." Victoria arrived at James's office precisely at 3, her mind racing with possibilities. What could he have discovered that warranted such secrecy? James's assistant showed her directly into his spacious corner office, where he was waiting with Walter Bennett. The presence of Richard's attorney heightened Victoria's concern. "Thank you for coming," James said, gesturing to a chair. "I apologize for the mystery, but I wanted to be certain before involving you." "Certain about what?" Victoria asked, looking between the two men. James exchanged a glance with Bennett before continuing. "After our last board meeting, I was reviewing some historical documents in preparation for the transition of shares to Emma and Ethan. I came across something troubling." He slid a folder across the desk. "This is a draft of Richard's will dated 8 months before his death, 4 months before the version that was executed." Victoria opened the folder with trepidation. Inside was a document similar to the will that had been read after Richard's death, but with one critical difference. Emma and Ethan were named as beneficiaries, each receiving 10% of Richard's personal estate and 5% of his Blackwood Enterprises shares. "I don't understand," Victoria said, looking up from the document. "If Richard drafted this version, why wasn't it the one that was executed?" Bennett shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "That's what concerns me, Miss Harrington. I have no record of preparing this draft, though it appears to be on our firm's letterhead. And the signature page has Richard's handwriting, though it's not witnessed or notarized." "Are you saying this was created without your knowledge?" Victoria asked, trying to make sense of the implications. "It appears so," Bennett confirmed, "which raises serious questions about who might have influenced the final version of the will, the one that specifically excluded any unacknowledged children." James leaned forward, his expression grave. "Victoria, we have reason to believe that Richard intended to acknowledge Emma and Ethan in his will, but was prevented from doing so." Victoria felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. "Prevented? By whom?" "That's what we need to determine," James replied. "But given the timing and the people who would have had access to Richard's legal documents, our suspicions point to either someone at Bennett's firm or Sophia," Victoria finished, the realization dawning. "You think Sophia might have ensured Emma and Ethan were excluded from the final will?" Bennett looked deeply uncomfortable. "I'm not making accusations, but the timeline is concerning. Richard met with me about updating his will shortly after a comprehensive physical examination. He mentioned wanting to make things right with all his children. We scheduled a follow-up meeting to finalize the details, but he canceled at the last minute. When we eventually executed the will 2 months later, He never mentioned Emma and Ethan again. Victoria's mind was racing. The letter he left, he mentioned a medical prognosis. Do you think he was diagnosed with something serious during that physical? Something that made him want to acknowledge the twins finally? It's possible, James acknowledged. Richard was very private about his health. Even Mother didn't know he was having heart problems until after his first minor attack 6 months before he died. Victoria stared at the draft will, trying to process this new information. If what you're suggesting is true, if someone deliberately influenced Richard to exclude Emma and Ethan, that would constitute fraud, wouldn't it? Potentially, Bennett confirmed, especially if undue influence was involved. But proving it would be extremely difficult without clear evidence. What evidence do we have? Victoria asked. James opened a drawer and removed another document. This is a record of a meeting Richard had with Dr. Marcus Feldman 3 days before the draft will was created. Dr. Feldman was Richard's cardiologist. And? Victoria prompted. And Dr. Feldman recently mentioned to me at a charity event that Richard had been deeply concerned about his legacy after receiving some concerning test results. He specifically mentioned Richard talking about children from his, quote, first marriage. Victoria felt a surge of emotion, anger, grief, vindication, all mingled together. So Richard was finally planning to acknowledge Emma and Ethan, possibly because he knew his time was limited. That's our theory, James confirmed. But something or someone changed his mind between this draft and the final will. Victoria stood, pacing the office as she considered the implications. What do you suggest we do with this information? James and Bennett exchanged glances again. Legally, we have options, Bennett began cautiously. This draft, while not executed, provides evidence of Richard's intentions. Combined with his letter and Dr. Feldman's recollections, we could petition the court to invalidate the executed will on grounds of potential fraud or undue influence. That would mean a public legal battle, Victoria pointed out, exposing family matters to scrutiny, possibly damaging Blackwood Enterprises' reputation. Yes, James agreed. Which is why I wanted to discuss this with you privately first. Emma and Ethan have already been acknowledged by the family. They're receiving substantial inheritances through Mother's generosity and the trusts Richard established. Is pursuing this legally worth the potential cost to everyone involved, including Alexander? Victoria paused by the window, looking out at the city skyline. The question was valid. A legal challenge would be messy, public, and potentially devastating for all involved, especially Alexander, who was just an innocent child. I need to think about this, she said finally, and I need to discuss it with Emma and Ethan. They're adults now. They deserve to know the truth and have a say in how we proceed. James nodded, respecting her decision. Of course. But Victoria, if we do pursue this, we need to be prepared for Sophia to fight back. She has a lot to lose, both financially and in terms of her reputation. I understand, Victoria said, gathering her purse. Thank you both for bringing this to my attention. I'll be in touch soon. As Victoria left the Blackwood building, her mind was churning with this new revelation. Had Richard truly intended to acknowledge the twins in his final days? Had Sophia somehow influenced him to change his mind, to protect her own interests and Alexander's inheritance? And if so, what was the right thing to do now? Pursue justice at the risk of tearing the newly formed family connections apart? Or accept the current arrangement, knowing it might not reflect Richard's true final wishes? That evening, after the twins had returned from dinner with Eleanor, Victoria called them into the living room. She had spent hours weighing her options, considering the potential consequences of each path forward. Now, she needed their input. There's something I need to discuss with you both, she began, showing them the documents James had shared. It appears your father may have intended to acknowledge you in his will, but was somehow prevented from doing so. Emma and Ethan listened intently, as Victoria explained what James and Bennett had discovered, their expressions growing increasingly troubled. So someone might have deliberately kept us out of the will? Ethan asked, his analytical mind immediately grasping the implications. And the primary suspect is Sophia? It's a possibility, Victoria confirmed, though we don't have definitive proof. Emma was studying the draft will, her artistic eye noting details others might miss. The handwriting in these margin notes, it's the same as in Dad's letter. These were his actual thoughts, his intentions. James and Bennett believe we have grounds to challenge the executed will, Victoria continued, but doing so would mean a public legal battle that could damage relationships with the Blackwoods and potentially hurt Alexander. Alexander, Emma repeated softly. He's just a kid. None of this is his fault. No, it isn't, Victoria agreed. Which is why I wanted to discuss this with you both before making any decisions. You're adults now. This affects your inheritance, your relationship with your father's family. You should have a say in how we proceed. Ethan stood, pacing the room much as Victoria had done in James's office. From a purely financial perspective, challenging the will might result in a larger inheritance for Emma and me. But we're already receiving substantial assets through grandmother's generosity and the trusts Dad established. It's not about the money, Emma said firmly. It's about the principle. If Dad wanted to acknowledge us and someone prevented that from happening, don't we have a responsibility to honor his true wishes? Even if it means potentially destroying the relationships we've built with the Blackwoods? Ethan countered. Even if it means publicly accusing Sophia of manipulation or fraud, when we don't have conclusive evidence? Victoria watched her children debate, pride mingling with sadness. They shouldn't have to face such complex ethical dilemmas at 18, yet they were approaching the situation with remarkable maturity. What do you think, Mom? Emma finally asked, turning to Victoria. Victoria took a deep breath. I think we need more information before making a decision. We should speak with Dr. Feldman directly, try to understand exactly what Richard said to him. And perhaps we should confront Sophia privately, before taking any legal action. Confront her? Ethan looked skeptical. Do you think she'd admit to anything? Probably not, Victoria acknowledged. But her reaction might tell us something. And it would give her a chance to explain if there's another side to this story we haven't considered. Emma nodded slowly. That seems fair. Before we accuse anyone publicly, we should try to get the full picture. I agree, Ethan said after a moment's consideration. But we should approach this strategically. If Sophia did influence Dad to exclude us, she's not going to confess easily. Victoria felt a surge of pride in her children's thoughtfulness. Then that's what we'll do. I'll contact Dr. Feldman tomorrow, and we'll request a private meeting with Sophia. The following day, Victoria arranged to meet Dr. Marcus Feldman at his office during his lunch break. The cardiologist was initially hesitant to discuss his former patient, but became more forthcoming when Victoria explained the situation. Richard was very concerned after we discovered the extent of his heart condition, Dr. Feldman confirmed, reviewing notes from his file. The initial tests showed significant blockage in 3 coronary arteries. I recommended immediate intervention, but Richard wanted to put his affairs in order first. Did he specifically mention children from his first marriage? Victoria asked. Dr. Feldman nodded. He said he had unfinished business with children from a previous relationship. He seemed quite distressed about it. Said he had been a coward for too long and needed to make things right before it was too late. And this was approximately when? Victoria pressed. About 8 months before his death, the doctor confirmed. We scheduled the procedure for the following week, but he postponed it twice. By the time we finally performed the surgery, his condition had deteriorated significantly. Victoria absorbed this information, the timeline aligning with the draft Will James had discovered. Did Sophia know about the severity of his condition? Oh yes, Dr. Feldman replied. She accompanied him to several appointments. She was quite concerned, especially about how the news might affect their son. Victoria thanked the doctor for his time, her suspicions growing stronger. If Sophia had known about Richard's heart condition and his desire to acknowledge Emma and Ethan, she would have had both motive and opportunity to influence the final version of his will. Armed with this additional information, Victoria arranged a meeting with Sophia at the Blackwood family home. She decided to bring Emma and Ethan with her partly because they deserved to be part of the conversation and partly because their presence might make it harder for Sophia to dissemble. Sophia received them in the sunroom, Alexander thankfully away at a friend's house for the afternoon. She seemed genuinely pleased to see them until Victoria explained the purpose of their visit. A draft will? Sophia repeated, her composure slipping slightly. I don't know anything about that. Richard handled his legal affairs privately. The draft specifically included Emma and Ethan, Victoria said, watching Sophia's reaction carefully. It was created shortly after Richard received concerning news about his heart condition. Sophia's hand trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. Richard had many drafts of many documents. He was meticulous about exploring all options before making decisions. This wasn't just an option, Ethan said quietly. According to Mr. Bennett, this was a nearly finalized document that was mysteriously replaced with one that specifically excluded us. Sophia's eyes narrowed slightly. What exactly are you implying? We're not implying anything, Emma interjected, her tone gentler than her brother's. We're trying to understand what happened. Our father left a letter saying he regretted not acknowledging us. Dr. Feldman confirms he expressed a desire to make things right with us, yet the final will specifically excluded us. It doesn't add up. Sophia stood abruptly, moving to the window. For a long moment, she stared out at the manicured gardens, her back to them. When she finally turned, her expression was carefully controlled. Richard was not well in his final year, she said slowly. The heart condition affected his thinking at times. He would make impulsive decisions, then reconsider them when he was thinking more clearly. Are you suggesting he changed his mind about acknowledging Emma and Ethan? Victoria asked. I'm saying Richard was conflicted, Sophia replied. He mentioned you both occasionally over the years. He kept track of your achievements. But he also worried about the impact of suddenly acknowledging adult children would have on Alexander, on the company, on our family's public image. So you knew about us all along, Ethan observed, his voice deceptively calm. Sophia had the grace to look ashamed. Not from the beginning. Richard told me about you after his father died. I encouraged him to reach out, but he was convinced it was too late, that you were better off without his complicated presence in your lives. That was his decision to make, Emma said, not yours. I never prevented Richard from acknowledging you, Sophia insisted. Whatever decisions he made about his will were his own. Victoria studied Sophia carefully, noting the slight flush on her cheeks, the way her fingers twisted her wedding ring. She was hiding something, but what? Sophia, Victoria said gently, if you know something about how that final will came to be, now is the time to share it. If we pursue this legally, everything will come out in discovery emails, phone records, conversations with attorneys. Sophia's composure cracked further. You would do that? After everything I've done to welcome you into this family? To ensure Alexander knows his siblings? To support Eleanor's decision to give Emma and Ethan shares of the company? We don't want to, Victoria assured her, but we need to understand what happened. Richard's letter, the draft will, Doctor. Feldman's recollections, they all point to Richard wanting to acknowledge Emma and Ethan. Something, or someone, changed that. Sophia sank back into her chair, suddenly looking exhausted. It wasn't me, she said quietly. At least, not directly. The room fell silent, all three Harringtons waiting for her to continue. Richard was determined to revise his will after his first heart scare, Sophia finally explained. He told me he wanted to acknowledge Emma and Ethan, to leave them a significant portion of his estate. I didn't object, how could I? They were his children. Then what happened? Ethan pressed, when Sophia paused. Richard Sr. happened, Sophia said bitterly, from beyond the grave. Victoria frowned in confusion. Richard's father? But he had been dead for years. Yes, but his influence lived on, Sophia continued. When Richard told his mother about his plans to acknowledge you both, Eleanor reminded him of a provision in Richard Sr.'s will, a provision none of us knew about until then. What provision? Victoria asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. If Richard ever publicly acknowledged children from his first marriage, a substantial portion of the family holdings would revert to a conservative foundation Richard Sr. had established. Sophia explained. It was his way of controlling Richard even after death, of ensuring the Blackwood name remained untarnished by what he saw as Richard's youthful mistake. Emma gasped softly. That's horrible. Our grandfather tried to erase us even before he knew we existed. It wasn't about you personally, Sophia clarified. Richard Sr. was obsessed with the family's public image. A messy divorce followed by secret children, it went against everything he valued. So Richard chose the money over acknowledging us, Ethan said flatly. Again. Sophia shook her head. It wasn't that simple. The provision wouldn't just have affected Richard's inheritance. It would have impacted Eleanor's financial security, James's position in the company, even charitable foundations the family had established. Richard was torn.
But he still drafted a will that included us, Victoria pointed out, after learning about this provision.
Yes, Sophia admitted. He was determined to find a way around it. He consulted with several attorneys specializing in trust law.
But in the end, they all said the same thing: the provision was ironclad. Acknowledging Emma and Ethan publicly would trigger catastrophic financial consequences for the entire family.
So he chose to exclude us again, Emma said, hurt evident in her voice despite her attempt to remain composed. He chose to protect everyone, Sophia corrected gently, including you two. The trusts he established for you were his compromise, providing for you financially without triggering his father's vindictive clause. Victoria processed this new information, pieces falling into place. Does Eleanor know we're aware of this provision now?
Yes, Sophia confirmed. She's the one who suggested. I tell you if you ask directly.
She's been carrying this burden for months, ashamed of her husband's manipulation but bound by fiduciary duty to uphold the terms of his will.
That explains why she was so determined to transfer shares from her personal holdings to Emma and Ethan, Victoria realized. She was trying to make amends without triggering the provision.
Sophia nodded.
Eleanor has been trying to right this wrong within the constraints she faces. We all have.
The room fell silent as the Harringtons absorbed this revelation. Richard's actions, while still disappointing, now made more sense.
He hadn't simply chosen his public image over his children. He had been caught in an impossible situation created by his controlling father.
Can we see this provision? Ethan finally asked, his analytical mind seeking verification.
The actual language? I'll have Bennett provide you with a copy, Sophia agreed.
Though I warn you, it's painful reading. Richard Sr.'s prejudices are laid bare in his choice of words. Victoria watched her children's faces, seeing them process this new information. The anger that had been building was now tempered with understanding, though the hurt remained.
What do we do with this information? Emma asked, looking between her mother and brother. Do we still challenge Dad's will?
I don't see how we can, Ethan replied thoughtfully. If we force the issue legally, we might trigger this provision and harm everyone, including grandmother and Uncle James.
And Alexander, Emma added softly. He's innocent in all this.
Victoria felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger at Richard Sr.'s posthumous control, sadness for the impossible position Richard had found himself in, and pride in her children's compassionate response. Perhaps there's another way, she suggested, a way to honor your father's true wishes without triggering the provision. Sophia looked at her curiously.
What do you have in mind?
The provision prevents Richard from publicly acknowledging Emma and Ethan as his children, Victoria said slowly, thinking it through. But what if the acknowledgement came from someone else? From all of you collectively, as a family? A public statement from the Blackwood family, welcoming Emma and Ethan without specifically stating Richard's paternity. Sophia mused, considering the idea. It might work, depending on the exact language of the provision. We'd need Bennett to review it carefully, Ethan cautioned, to ensure we don't inadvertently trigger the clause.
But it could be a way to honor Dad's wishes without harming the family financially, Emma said, warming to the concept.
Sophia studied the three Harringtons with newfound respect. After everything Richard put you through, you're still trying to protect his family. That's remarkable.
We are his family too, Victoria said simply. And family looks out for each other, even when it's complicated, even when it's painful.
The meeting with Sophia marked a turning point. Over the next few weeks, Walter Bennett worked closely with other attorneys to craft a carefully worded statement from the Blackwood family, welcoming Emma and Ethan without explicitly identifying Richard as their father. The statement acknowledged their connection to the Blackwood family and celebrated their inclusion in family business and philanthropic efforts.
Eleanor reviewed the final draft with tears in her eyes. It's not perfect, she admitted to Victoria.
It's not the clear acknowledgement they deserve, but it's the best we can do within these constraints.
It's enough, Victoria assured her.
Emma and Ethan understand the situation now. They don't blame Richard, at least, not entirely. And they certainly don't blame you. The statement was released to the press in conjunction with the announcement of the Emma and Ethan Harrington Foundation, which would support arts education and entrepreneurship programs for young people.
The carefully crafted narrative presented the twins as valued members of the extended Blackwood family without triggering Richard Sr.'s vindictive provision. Public reaction was mixed. Some media outlets speculated about the twins' exact relationship to the Blackwoods, while others focused on the philanthropic aspects of the story. Through it all, Victoria maintained a dignified silence, allowing the twins to decide how much of their personal history to share. "It's strange," Emma remarked one evening as they sorted through her belongings for college. "Everyone's talking about us, speculating about our connection to the Blackwoods, but no one knows the whole story." "And they don't need to," Victoria replied, folding a sweater. "Your relationship with your father's family is yours to define, not the public's." "I keep thinking about Dad," Emma continued, sitting on the edge of her bed, trapped between his father's control and his own conscience. "It doesn't excuse what he did, but it helps me understand it better." Victoria nodded, recognizing her daughter's capacity for empathy. "People are rarely all good or all bad. Your father made serious mistakes, but he also tried, in his limited way, to make amends. The trusts, the surveillance, the letter," Emma listed. "His way of being present without actually being present." "Exactly," Victoria agreed. "Not enough, but not nothing either." Across town, Ethan was having a similar conversation with James as they reviewed documents related to Ethan's new position on the Blackwood Enterprises board, a position Eleanor had insisted he take despite his youth. "Your father would be proud of how you've handled all this," James told him. "You've shown remarkable maturity and business acumen." "I wish I could have known him," Ethan admitted. "The real him, not just the idea of him I've carried all these years." James nodded understanding. Richard was complex. Brilliant in business, but emotionally stunted in many ways, a product of our father's rigid parenting. He never learned how to navigate emotional challenges with the same confidence he brought to business decisions. "That's no excuse for abandoning his children," Ethan said, though without the anger that would have colored such a statement weeks earlier. "No, it's not," James agreed. "But understanding doesn't require excusing. It just helps us avoid repeating the same mistakes." As summer drew to a close, the Harringtons and Blackwoods gathered for a farewell dinner before Emma and Ethan departed for college. The evening was bittersweet, a celebration of new beginnings, tinged with awareness of all that had been lost over the years. Alexander had prepared a special gift for his older siblings, hand-drawn portraits that showed remarkable talent for a 10-year-old. "So you don't forget what I look like while you're at college," he explained earnestly. "As if we could forget you, buddy," Ethan assured him, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. Eleanor presented each twin with a leather-bound family history she had compiled, complete with photographs and stories going back generations. "Your heritage," she said simply. "It belongs to you as much as to any Blackwood." Sophia's gift was more practical state-of-the-art laptops for their studies, already loaded with software specific to their fields. "Richard would have wanted you to have the best tools," she said, her voice catching slightly. James contributed investment portfolios he had personally selected, tailored to each twin's interests and goals. "Something to build on," he explained. "A foundation for your futures." Victoria watched these exchanges with mixed emotions. The generosity was genuine, the connections real. Yet she couldn't help wondering how different life might have been if Richard had found the courage to acknowledge his children from the beginning, if he had fought against his father's control rather than submitting to it. After dinner, as the others moved to the living room for coffee, Victoria found herself alone in Richard's study, a room she had deliberately avoided during previous visits to the Blackwood home. Now curiosity drew her in, a desire to understand the man who had shaped her life in such profound ways. The room was exactly as Richard had left it, desk meticulously organized, bookshelves arranged by subject, awards and accolades displayed on the walls. It was the space of a man who valued order and achievement above all else. Victoria ran her fingers along the edge of the desk, remembering the young man she had fallen in love with, passionate, ambitious, full of dreams. Somewhere along the way, that young man had lost himself in expectations and obligations, becoming someone who could walk away from his own children to preserve a family legacy. "It's strange being in here, isn't it?" Victoria turned to find Sophia in the doorway, 2 glasses of wine in hand. She offered one to Victoria, who accepted it with a nod of thanks. "I've been avoiding it," Victoria admitted.
Too many complicated feelings. Sophia entered the room, looking around with a wistful expression. I used to find him in here late at night, staring at his computer screen. I thought he was working. But after his death, I discovered he was often looking at news articles about Emma and Ethan, their school achievements, art shows, business competitions. Victoria took a sip of wine, absorbing this information. He really did keep track of them. Obsessively, Sophia confirmed. There's an entire encrypted folder on his personal server dedicated to them. Photos, news clippings, reports from the private investigators he hired. He knew everything about their lives, even as he remained absent from them. That must have been difficult for you, Victoria observed, knowing your husband was so preoccupied with children from his previous marriage. Sophia shrugged slightly. Richard and I had a complicated relationship. We cared for each other, but we weren't soulmates. I think part of him always regretted leaving you. The admission hung in the air between them, two women connected by the same man in vastly different ways. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Sophia continued after a moment. But I thought you should know that, in his own way, Richard never stopped caring about you and the twins. He just didn't know how to reconcile that care with the life he had chosen. Victoria nodded, understanding. Thank you for telling me, and thank you for how you've welcomed Emma and Ethan into your life, into Alexander's life. You could have made this situation much more difficult. They're Alexander's siblings, Sophia said simply, and they're remarkable young people. You did an extraordinary job raising them, Victoria. Far better than Richard and I have done with Alexander, I fear. Alexander is a wonderful boy, Victoria assured her. Creative, kind, thoughtful. You should be proud of him. I am, Sophia agreed. But I worry about the pressure of being Richard Blackwood's only acknowledged heir. The expectations, the scrutiny. I've seen what that did to Richard himself. Victoria considered this, recognizing the cycle of pressure and expectation that had shaped Richard's life and choices. Perhaps Emma and Ethan can help with that. They've grown up outside the Blackwood spotlight, developed their own identities and strengths. They could be good influences for Alexander. I hope so, Sophia said, genuine emotion in her voice. I want better for him than what Richard had, a life defined by more than just the family name and business. As they rejoined the others in the living room, Victoria was struck by the unlikely tableau before her. Emma showing Eleanor her portfolio on a tablet, Ethan and James teaching Alexander a card game, all of them connected by blood and circumstance despite years of separation. It wasn't the family she had envisioned when she fell in love with Richard Blackwood all those years ago. It was messier, more complicated, shaped by absence and secrets and belated truths. But it was real, and it was healing, and perhaps that was enough. The day Emma and Ethan left for college dawned clear and bright. Victoria had insisted on driving them herself, Emma to Rhode Island, Ethan to Pennsylvania, wanting these final hours together before they embarked on their new lives. As they loaded the last of Emma's belongings into Victoria's SUV, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. James stepped out, followed by Eleanor, Sophia, and Alexander. We couldn't let you leave without a proper send-off, Eleanor explained, embracing first Emma, then Ethan. Alexander presented them each with small wrapped packages. Open them when you get to school, he instructed solemnly. They're good luck charms. The impromptu farewell gathering continued for several minutes. Last-minute advice, promises to call, plans for Thanksgiving break. Victoria watched her children interact with their newfound family, marveling at how quickly these relationships had developed despite their complicated beginnings. As they prepared to depart, Eleanor took Victoria aside. I want to thank you, the older woman said quietly, for raising such extraordinary grandchildren and for allowing us into their lives despite everything that happened. They deserve to know their heritage, Victoria replied simply. All of it, the good and the bad. Eleanor nodded, understanding the subtle reference to Richard Sr.'s manipulative provision. We can't change the past, but perhaps we can build a better future. Together. The drive to Rhode Island was filled with Emma's excited chatter about her upcoming classes, the art supplies she planned to purchase, the roommate she had connected with online. Victoria listened, offering advice when asked, but mostly just savoring these precious hours with her daughter. As they unpacked Emma's belongings in her dormitory room, Victoria found herself fighting back tears. This moment sending her firstborn off to college
was one she had both anticipated and dreaded for years. "Mom, I'll be fine," Emma assured her, noticing her emotional state. "And I'll be home for Thanksgiving before you know it." "I know," Victoria said, straightening a picture frame on Emma's desk, a recent photo of the three Harringtons with the Blackwood family, all smiling together, despite the complicated history between them. "I'm just so proud of you, of the woman you've become, despite all the challenges." Emma hugged her tightly. "Because of you, Mom. Everything I am is because of you." After a tearful goodbye, Victoria began the drive to Pennsylvania to deliver Ethan to Wharton. Her phone rang halfway there, James Blackwood calling to check on their progress. "Emma's all settled," Victoria reported. "Now on my way to get Ethan situated." "Excellent," James replied. "Listen, Victoria, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. The board position we've been holding for Ethan, we'd like to offer a similar advisory role to you." Victoria was startled by the suggestion. "Me? I don't have Ethan's head for business." "No, but you have something equally valuable: design expertise and a perspective we sorely need," James explained. "The Blackwood corporate headquarters redesign you've proposed is brilliant. It's made us realize how much our other properties could benefit from your vision." "I'm flattered, James, but I have my own business to run." "Of course," he acknowledged. "This would be a consulting position, not full-time. But it would give you a voice in the company that will eventually belong, in part, to your children." Victoria considered the offer, recognizing it for what it was: not just a business proposition, but an olive branch, a way of incorporating her into the Blackwood fold just as Emma and Ethan had been. "I'll think about it," she promised. "Let me get Ethan settled first, and then we can discuss details." After delivering Ethan to his dormitory, another emotional farewell, though more restrained than Emma's, Victoria began the long drive home to an empty apartment. The silence was deafening after 18 years of constant activity, of shared meals and homework sessions and late-night conversations. She had expected to feel bereft, and she did. But there was something else too, a sense of accomplishment, of a job well done. She had raised two remarkable human beings who were now embarking on their own journeys, equipped with values and strength and resilience. And unexpectedly, she had gained something: two connections to the Blackwood family that, while complicated, offered new possibilities for all of them. As Victoria unlocked her apartment door, her phone chimed with incoming messages. Emma sending photos of her completed dorm room, Ethan reporting that he'd already connected with his academic advisor, Alexander asking when she would visit next, Eleanor inviting her to Sunday dinner. Victoria smiled, setting her keys on the counter. Her apartment might be empty, but her life was surprisingly full. The journey that had begun with Richard's death and the shocking will reading had led to an outcome none of them could have predicted: not just financial security for Emma and Ethan, but a genuine family connection that transcended Richard's failures. 3 months later, Victoria stood in the elegantly decorated ballroom of the Blackwood Foundation headquarters, watching as Emma and Ethan addressed the gathered crowd of donors and community leaders. The official launch of the Emma and Ethan Harrington Foundation had drawn New York's elite, all curious about these previously unknown members of the Blackwood orbit. "Our foundation's mission is to support young people facing extraordinary challenges," Emma explained, her confidence evident as she gestured toward the displays showcasing planned initiatives. "Whether they're aspiring artists without resources for proper training, or young entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas, but no access to mentorship. We believe talent and determination should be the only requirements for success," Ethan continued seamlessly. "Not family connections or financial advantages." Victoria felt a surge of pride watching her children command the room. They had grown so much in just a few months, not just in their academic pursuits, but in their understanding of privilege and responsibility. Eleanor Blackwood stood beside Victoria, leaning slightly on her cane but radiating satisfaction. "They're naturals," she observed quietly. "Richard's presence with your strength and integrity." "They've had good examples," Victoria replied, nodding toward James, who was skillfully networking with potential donors, and Sophia, who had designed the foundation's striking logo and marketing materials. "Better examples than Richard had," Eleanor said with a hint of regret. "My husband and I, we emphasize the wrong things. Success over compassion. Appearance over authenticity.
Richard absorbed those lessons too well. Victoria squeezed the older woman's hand gently. We all do the best we can with what we know at the time. Richard made his choices, but he also tried to make amends in his own way. Through the trusts, Eleanor nodded. And through his letter? And through Alexander, Victoria added, watching as the young boy proudly showed guests the foundation website he had helped design. He lives on in all 3 of his children. The foundation launch was a resounding success, raising over $2 million in initial funding. As the evening wound down, Victoria found herself on the balcony, taking a moment of quiet amid the celebration. "Penny for your thoughts," came a familiar voice. James Blackwood joined her, offering a glass of champagne. Victoria accepted it with a smile, just reflecting on how much has changed in a few months. This time last year, Emma and Ethan had never met any of you. Richard was still alive, and we were preparing for the twins' college applications with no idea what was coming. Life has a way of surprising us, James agreed. Not always pleasantly, but sometimes the most difficult beginnings lead to unexpected blessings. Victoria studied him thoughtfully. Over the past months, James had become a valued friend and mentor to both twins, especially Ethan. Unlike Richard, James seemed comfortable balancing business success with personal connections, ambition with compassion. "The board position you offered me," Victoria said, changing the subject. "I've been considering it." "And?" James prompted, his expression hopeful. "I'd like to accept, with one condition," Victoria replied. "I want to establish a design division within Blackwood Enterprises, one that prioritizes sustainable, community-focused development. Not just luxury properties for the wealthy, but mixed-use spaces that benefit entire neighborhoods." James raised an eyebrow. "That's a significant shift from our traditional business model." "It is," Victoria acknowledged, "but it's the future, and it's what Emma and Ethan would want to see from the company they'll partially inherit." James considered this, then nodded slowly. Richard would have resisted such a change. He was brilliant, but traditional in his approach to business. "But I think you're right." He extended his hand. "Welcome to Blackwood Enterprises, Victoria. I look forward to seeing your vision take shape." As they shook hands, Victoria felt a sense of completion. She had entered the Blackwood orbit as a young design student, left it as a divorced single mother, and now returned as a successful businesswoman in her own right, ready to help shape the company's future for her children's benefit. Inside, the party continued. Emma was deep in conversation with a renowned gallery owner who had expressed interest in her work. Ethan was discussing investment strategies with several foundation board members. Alexander was showing Eleanor something on his tablet, both of them laughing together. Sophia approached Victoria as she re-entered the ballroom. "Successful evening," she observed, her gaze taking in the scene. "Very," Victoria agreed. "Thank you for all your help with the design elements. They're perfect." Sophia nodded acknowledgement. "It's the least I could do." She hesitated, then added, "I've been meaning to tell you Alexander asks about Richard more and more lately. About what kind of father he was, what he was like as a young man." Victoria understood the unspoken question. "What do you tell him?" "The good parts," Sophia replied. "His intelligence, his vision, his occasional kindness. But Alexander deserves a more complete picture as he gets older." "Perhaps we could help with that," Victoria suggested. "Emma and Ethan have their own memories now, the letters, the journals, the stories Eleanor has shared. Between all of us, we might be able to give Alexander a more balanced understanding of his father." "I'd appreciate that," Sophia said sincerely. "I want him to learn from Richard's mistakes, not repeat them." As the evening drew to a close, Victoria gathered with Emma, Ethan, and the Blackwoods for a final toast. Alexander, fighting sleep but determined to participate in the adult moment, raised his glass of sparkling cider alongside the champagne flutes. "To the Harrington Foundation," James proposed. "And to family," Eleanor added, her gaze encompassing all of them, in all its complex, imperfect forms. "To the future," Ethan suggested, looking at his sister and mother with quiet confidence. "And to Dad," Emma said softly, surprising everyone, "who brought us together in the end, even if it wasn't the way he intended." They drank to these sentiments, this unlikely family bound by blood and choice and complicated history.
As Victoria looked around the circle, she realized that Richard's greatest legacy wasn't his business empire or his wealth, but these connections that had formed in his absence, connections that might, with care and intention, heal the wounds his choices had created. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the newly redesigned lobby of Blackwood Enterprises headquarters, surveying the transformation. Gone was the cold, imposing marble and steel that had characterized Richard's aesthetic. In its place was a warm, inviting space that balanced luxury with accessibility, living walls of greenery, comfortable seating areas, and a community gallery showcasing local artists, with Emma's work prominently featured. "It's magnificent," Eleanor declared, touring the space with Victoria. Richard would have hated it initially, then grudgingly admitted its brilliance once he saw how people responded to it. Victoria laughed, recognizing the truth in this assessment. He was resistant to change, wasn't he? Terrified of it, Eleanor confirmed. A trait he inherited from his father, unfortunately. They continued their tour, stopping to admire the central feature of the lobby, a striking sculpture commissioned from an emerging artist, representing 3 intertwined trees growing from a single root system. The plaque beside it read simply, "Family, separate but connected." Emma's concept? Eleanor guessed. Victoria nodded. She designed it, though she insisted on having another artist execute it. Said she was too close to the subject matter to do it justice. Eleanor studied the sculpture thoughtfully. "It's perfect. Different branches. Same roots." As they completed their tour, Victoria's phone chimed with a message from Ethan. His first semester at Wharton had been a resounding success, his business acumen drawing attention from professors and fellow students alike. The message contained a photo of him with James at a business conference, both looking pleased after Ethan's presentation on sustainable investment strategies. "He's thriving," Victoria told Eleanor, showing her the photo. "James has been an incredible mentor to him." "James always wanted a protege," Eleanor replied. "Richard was too competitive to accept his guidance, but Ethan seems to welcome it." Another message arrived, this one from Emma. She had just received news that her portfolio had been selected for a prestigious student exhibition, an honor rarely bestowed on first-year students. "Emma too," Victoria said, sharing this news with evident pride. The professor said her work shows remarkable emotional depth and technical skill beyond her years. "Richard's artistic eye with your emotional intelligence," Eleanor observed, "a powerful combination." As they made their way to Eleanor's waiting car, the older woman paused, leaning more heavily on her cane than usual. "Victoria, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." Victoria noted the serious tone. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "I'm getting old," Eleanor said matter-of-factly. "My health isn't what it was. I've been putting my affairs in order, and I've made some decisions I wanted you to know about." Victoria waited, concerned by this sudden shift in conversation. "I've revised my will," Eleanor continued. "In addition to the Blackwood shares I've already transferred to Emma and Ethan, I'm leaving them my personal art collection and the summer house in Maine, places and things that have no connection to Richard Sr.'s vindictive provision." "Eleanor, that's incredibly generous." "But it's not generosity," Eleanor interrupted, echoing her words from months earlier. "It's justice. And there's something else." She reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope. "This is for you." Victoria accepted the envelope with confusion. "What is it?" "The deed to a property in Harborview," Eleanor explained. "The coastal town where Richard spent his summers as a boy. It's a lovely old house on the bluff, with a studio that gets perfect northern light. I thought you might use it as a weekend retreat, a place to design and reflect." Victoria was stunned by the gesture. "Eleanor, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not enough," Eleanor countered firmly. "Victoria, you raised Richard's children with no support from our family. You've shown remarkable grace in allowing us into their lives now. Please, accept this as a token of my appreciation not just for Emma and Ethan, but for you." Recognizing the importance of this gesture to Eleanor, Victoria nodded. "Thank you. We'll treasure it." As Eleanor's car pulled away, Victoria remained on the sidewalk, the deed clutched in her hand. From abandoned wife to single mother to successful businesswoman to what? Family elder? Connector of broken pieces? Whatever her role now, it felt right.
a culmination of the journey that had begun with that devastating will reading less than a year ago. That evening, Victoria hosted Sunday dinner in her apartment, a tradition that had evolved over recent months. James arrived first, bringing wine and business updates. Sophia and Alexander came next, the boy excitedly sharing news about his science project. Eleanor was last, moving more slowly these days, but still sharp as ever. As Victoria served the meal she had prepared, she looked around the table at these people who had become, improbably, her family. Not the family she had expected when she fell in love with Richard Blackwood all those years ago, but a family nonetheless, complex, imperfect, healing. Emma and Ethan joined via video call from their respective campuses, their faces filling the tablet propped at the end of the table. They shared updates on classes and campus life, asked Alexander about his latest coding project, discussed holiday plans with the adults. "We should all go to the main house for Christmas," Emma suggested. "It's beautiful in the snow, according to grandmother." "Perfect for sledding," Eleanor confirmed, smiling at Alexander's immediate enthusiasm. "And the Harborview house will be ready by spring break," James added, nodding to Victoria. "The renovations are on schedule." Victoria listened to this easy conversation, marveling at how naturally they had all adapted to their new relationships. Richard's absence remained a palpable void at times, but they had built connections around that void, creating something new and unexpectedly beautiful from the broken pieces he left behind. Later, after the guests had departed and Victoria was alone in her apartment, she found herself drawn to the small box where she kept Richard's letter. Reading it again, she was struck by his final words, "Emma and Ethan, you are my greatest accomplishment, though I can claim no credit for the remarkable people you've become. That honor belongs entirely to your mother." For the first time, Victoria felt not anger or grief when reading these words, but a sense of peace. Richard had failed as a husband and father, but in his absence, she had found strength she never knew she possessed. And now, ironically, his death had created opportunities for Emma and Ethan that she could never have provided alone. Not just financial security, but a sense of heritage, of belonging to something larger than themselves. Victoria closed the box and moved to her desk, where blueprints for the Harborview house renovation awaited her attention. The future stretched before her, not the one she had once imagined, but one rich with possibility nonetheless. Emma and Ethan would forge their own paths, carrying both her resilience and Richard's ambition into the world. The Blackwoods would continue to be part of their lives, these relationships evolving and deepening over time. And Victoria herself would continue to build not just houses and corporate headquarters, but bridges between past and future, between loss and new beginnings. Richard Blackwood had left her penniless with hidden twins all those years ago. But in the end, she had gained something far more valuable than money she had built, a family, a legacy, a life of meaning and purpose, and that was a fortune no will could ever dictate. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love for more powerful stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your way forward after betrayal. Share in the comments if you've ever had to rebuild your life after someone let you down, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful futures come from the most painful pasts.